Hello, and welcome to another episode of Wide Awake Politics. It is Wednesday, January 15th, 2025. A couple things happened yesterday. One, the Denver Nuggets won. Jamal Murray scored 45. No big deal. Besides that, in the world of politics, a lot is happening this week. There's a lot of Senate confirmation hearings for that advice and consent clause to the Constitution that we talked about in a previous episode. So if you are not familiar with the advice and consent clause of the Constitution, go back and look at that before you start watching these episodes. So you have that historical background and knowledge, right? So we are more informed citizens. So a couple things. I thought about doing an entire wrap up, and one, it's just going to be very cumbersome. And, I've gotten a lot of feedback. Episodes are too long. I get it. You can break them up, but whatever. No, I'm just kidding. So I am going to try to make some smaller episodes, or maybe break them up into different parts. We'll see. I can't, I'm so bad at self-editing. It's a problem. Anyway, let's get to it, right? So, but it would be cumbersome if I wanted to have all of it together in one. So, especially when we talk about, I don't think I'd give it enough emphasis for the ones that need it, right? Like today, there's a bunch of different hearings going on. I believe there's 6. Pam Bondi up for Attorney General is probably the most important one today. I know we have Secretary of State Marco Rubio, but I don't think that there's any issues. I don't see any issues with his nomination or him being in that role. There's nothing that I see that would preclude him from being in that. He's absolutely qualified. No matter how I agree with or disagree with him on politics, he's qualified for the position. So, yesterday we had the Secretary of Defense nominee, Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth is a decorated veteran. He also is extremely well educated. I believe Stanford and Harvard, or I don't know, but he's extremely well educated. He's written a bunch of books. We heard some of the books from excerpts from some of the books at the hearing. The War on Warriors. Okay. Where he talks about women not needing to be in combat. We don't need moms in the military, especially in combat, I guess. To me, if you're going to say something about moms and lethality, moms are probably the most lethal people. I don't know. I think that I wouldn't go after a mama, but that's just me. Anyway, but I don't want to start this contentious because I do think that there are things that were said yesterday in the hearing that I agree with. But I will start off by saying that there are 2 parts to that advice and consent clause that usually occurs after the nominee, after it's announced. Then what normally happens is senators on the committee that's in charge of moving the nominee to the entire Senate floor for an entire Senate vote. So for Secretary of Defense, it's the Armed Services Committee, which we saw yesterday. What normally happens is the nominee goes in and meets with every single one of the senators on that committee. And the reason why they meet with those senators is, one, they're going to be working with them for a long period of time. Normally, these confirmation hearings are just that confirmation, right? Like, it's usually boring. And they talk about I say boring to the vast majority of Americans. It's not to me because I like it, but the vast majority of Americans would find these confirmation hearings normally pretty boring because the committee is sitting there and they're going, all right, can you commit to coming to my state and talking to these people, which you saw a little bit of yesterday? Can you commit to this? What are your thoughts on nuclear deterrence? Those are the types of things that usually happens. And what happens whenever they meet in private before these confirmation hearings is for the senators to get to know the nominee who's more than likely going to be in that position. They can talk about things they agree on, talk about things they can work together on, talk about any type of hesitation that senator might have about the appointment of that person. And then they can discuss those in private. And you saw a little bit of that whenever Joni Ernst, the senator, the Republican senator, was talking to him, and they kind of joked at the beginning about like they've had honest conversations. And that's because those should be honest and a little intense if there are ideological differences in whatever that position and committee is doing. So what I did find disheartening at the very beginning of the hearing was the fact that the nominee Pete Hegseth did not meet and did not make a conscious effort to meet with all the senators on the panel. He seemed to have met with the Republican members several times, but did not meet with many of the Democrat members of the committee. Now, hopefully they work together moving forward. His nomination is not in question anymore. Joni Ernst, she was the biggest question mark, and she came out last night and said she was voting for him. So Pete Hegseth will more than likely be the next Secretary of Defense. But again, these are the things that I think that we should be working on together, and some of the things that we heard yesterday. So things that I want to say that I agree with. What? Yeah, I agree with. 1, the Pentagon should be passing audits. Simple as that. It hasn't passed an audit in like 8 years. I mean, this is not a new thing. It was the previous administration too. They don't pass audits. They don't know where money goes. And I don't know if it's like the thinking is like we audit everybody else's stuff and so ours should be good, but that needs to change. 1,000%. It doesn't make any sense to me. I've been on the receiving end of audits from the DoD. They're not fun. Like, they're not just like, let me just check this. No, they are doing a full exam, if you know what I mean, like getting in there. But no, they should absolutely be passing audits. And the person who's in charge of the Secretary of Defense should have some experience doing that and understanding a full-scale audit of an entire, like billions of dollars from an organization standpoint. Next thing, reimagination in acquisition processes. Yes, the acquisition process needs to change so hard. It needs to change so much in the DoD. And there are people working on it right now, and there are people been working on it for years, and I do not want to denigrate their work because they have spent hours banging their head against the wall. I know it because I've seen it for people trying to change this process. Now, the problem that I've seen personally, and this is an anecdote, so again, personal anecdote, but I do believe that this is a problem across the DoD, is there's a people in the middleman position that are risk adverse. They don't want to make decisions because they are self-preservation, right? They're risk averse because of self-preservation. They don't want to be the person to make that decision in case it does fail. The problem with that is because everything becomes so stale. Now, this is kind of just a theoretical, okay? So if the warfighter says, this is what's happening on the ground, this is something I need. They say, okay. So the government says, we need this thing to help the warfighter. Government goes out and says, hey, defense companies or companies out there, here is something that we need to have made to help the warfighter. Can you build it? And then all these companies come out and they say, yeah, we can build it. We can do this for this much and this much and this much. Depending on the contract, they decide on a company. They put them on contract. 6 months later, they're like, all right, so here's all your requirements. Let's kick off this thing, right? 6 months later. And then they're like, oh, we can get that done in a year. And then it's got to go through all of these processes. And there's valid points to some of these processes, like testing and security, all that kind of stuff, right? So you want to, 1, make sure it works, and 2, make sure it's not going to be filled with any type of malware or anything else, and that it's not going to break the entire system of whatever it's integrating into. So, warfighter says this thing. I need this thing to help with on ground right now. 2 years later, The government says, hey, warfighter, here's that thing you asked for. And the warfighter says, I needed that 2 years ago. Now I need this thing. And they're like, let's start this process over. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And I'm not saying that happens, like, that's real, but it does happen, and it's real, and it's stupid. I hate to use that word, but it's just, So yes, reimagination inside of acquisition, and there's people right now who know how to do it, that know how to do it safely, securely inside the organizations. But there's a bunch of people at this level who are so risk averse, they won't say, go and do it. Go turn that thing on. Now, again, there are people within the DoD that are doing this quickly. They're answering the warfighter quickly, right? They're going, you need that? All right, we'll stay up all night. 2 days later, here's that thing you need, right? If it's software equipped. Like, if it's an equipment thing, it's a little bit different. Let's do things faster. Let's make sure it's safe. Let's make sure it's secure. But we have to be able to do things faster. We have to be able to respond to emerging threats quickly. How do we do that? We do that by empowering those people. We do that by ensuring that those people in that middle level are not risk adverse. They're not completely concerned with self-preservation, and that they surround themselves with people that will go out and lean forward, right? Now, you do also have to have a very good security office. Very good security as far as physical security, sure. But we're talking about like infrastructure, as far as like IT, right? So, because that's the biggest thing. When we talk about technology now, we're talking about like soft targets. We're talking about, we're talking a lot about like how software gets pushed and everything else, right? So, couple things there. I agree with all of that. You have to have people, the right people for that. Now, is Pete Hegseth the right person for that? I don't think he has the experience. I don't think he has the attitude. There's a lot of things that should the Secretary of Defense be. And Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, Senator Mullen, pointed out that there are no real qualifications except that you have to be an American citizen or something, and that you have to be apolitical. It's civilian-led, right? It's civilian-led. Sure, those are the minimum qualifications. Is that what we want in one of our most critical positions? Is like, are you serious? Like, that's. Well, he meets those qualifications. You are a senator, sir. Things that I heard that I was miffed about. Everything having to do with Hegseth's comments when it comes to women in combat, women in the military. Every comment that he's made prior to being nominated has been inflammatory remarks about women in combat. Now, yesterday he tried to say that it was about standards and that they've watered down standards and combat roles for women. And his biggest thing at the beginning was talking about how he wants to be, non-political, not bring this in, but he talks about smear campaigns from the liberal media the entire time. He talks about DEI and woke, and he talks about these quotas that the military has been placed to have, right? And you hear DEI, woke, all of these things, quotas. The last week has shown me with the fires in California, as soon as you have a woman or a person of color come up to a microphone, there's a vast number of people that just start screaming DEI before that person even says a word. That's disheartening. Now, when you see a woman in combat, all you're seeing from a certain group of people now is DEI. Well, that person's only there because DEI. They don't give a crap about women and what women can do. Because Senator Gillibrand, just like the Army spokesperson who spoke after the hearing yesterday, when Hegseth said that their standards are different between men and women in combat, there's no difference in PT standards for combat roles. That's from the Army spokesperson and what Senator Gillibrand was telling Pete Hegseth in America yesterday. So inflammatory statements about having used an office for political. So already said during the hearings and before that women in combat are distractions. They can't carry all of this equipment. They don't meet the same standards. Their standards are watered down. The Army spokesperson said that there are no differences in the PT standards for those MOSs. MOSs meaning the type of it's the numbering scheme for your job. I was a 1 Alpha 8 X2 in the military, in the U.S. Air Force. I don't know the MOSs for Army. It's not my thing. In the Air Force, we called them AFSCs because we're different. But when they talk about those things, right, it's an inflammatory thing to just go out there. And then whenever pressed upon it, he's like, well, that's just what I hear from, the men and women that are working. A lot of times, people like Pete Hegseth will find people that are disgruntled in the military. And I won't deny that he probably talked to people and they were like, oh yeah, they told me I had to hire this many women. They told me I had to do this. They told me how to do that. Are there probably a little bit of that going on? I'm sure. Is it written down? No. Are there actual quotas? No. And if there are, then there should be people investigating that. And we have mechanisms to do that. But what he has created by insinuating that there are differences is it allows people to go, as soon as they see a woman in combat, DEI. She doesn't deserve to be there. You have no idea. You have no idea. But this is what we hear whenever you just keep hearing DEI. Well, they just want to DEI this and DEI that. Get rid of it. Get rid of it. Is that going to get rid of you going up and as soon as you see a person of color or a woman go to a podium, just to automatically assume that they only got there because of DEI? That gets me spun up. I'm sorry. It does. Because it's wrong. It's wrong. But we care about women and girls. Senator Tuberville from Alabama, former coach, right? He's had some things to say this week. One of the things that he said this week is that the California wildfire funding should be tied to something, right? I wonder how much Alabama has gotten in disaster relief. Do we really want to play that game? Because I know they know Democrats won't play the game. They know Democrats won't stop funding for even the bluest or the reddest of red states. But the Republicans, now they're in power. Are they going to start stopping funding for natural disasters in states that they don't ideologically agree with? What are we doing? But Senator Tuberville said that he talked to some SEALs that came back. Talked to some SEALs and they got out because as soon as they got back from all over the world, they had to do DEI training. Shut up. The spokesperson for the Naval Spec Warfare, so that's the people are in charge of the SEALs, said he's not aware of any of that training that he's talking about, that they don't go through DEI training. So again, you have a sitting senator and somebody that's nominated for Secretary of Defense flat out lying. And again, pushing this narrative that DEI is what's killing everything. So DEI and women are killing the military. Women make up, 14% of the military? But they're the ones killing it. They're the ones lowering all the standards that aren't being lowered. All right, anyway. But seriously, so some of the other things that happened yesterday that I want to talk about that I think are important. There was a lot of discussion back and forth. I think one of the things I will agree with is whenever they were talking about the different situations with threats evolving, I know there are great Republicans on the committee that really are, I think most people on that committee understand the gravity of what's happening with China and understand that threat. So we do have to we do have to posture ourselves for that, and that's going to take a lot. It's going to take initiative. It's going to take a serious person in this position, a person that's not afraid to stand up to the president of the time. One senator that I was super impressed with was Senator Slotkin from Michigan. She's a former CIA case officer. She's done numerous deployments overseas. She was excellent in her questioning. People get mad at women a lot on social media. I saw it yesterday with Senator Duckworth's testimony, Senator Gillibrand's, and Senator Kane's testimony, where a lot of people were like, oh, they were too emotional and blah, blah, blah. Well, Senator Duckworth is emotional because she's a female combat veteran who lost both of her legs in combat and worked to get back to try to be with her fellow soldiers back on active duty. That's what she worked for. And so she has a reason to be emotional, if that's what you want to call it. Tim Kaine and Senator Kaine and Senator Kelly had some questions about Pete Hegseth's ability to do the job. But Senator Slotkin asked serious questions about, I guess, the loyalty of Mr. Hegseth. One being, would he be willing to step up and stop or combat or refuse an unlawful order? And Pete Hegseth's initial response was that he completely just thinks that it's ridiculous. I can't remember the exact words, but it's pretty much like it's ridiculous that preposterous that Trump would even try to even insinuate that President-elect Trump would give an unlawful order. In Senator Slotkin's responses, she put out the fact that, expertly defined the fact that one of President-elect Trump's original secretaries of defense from his first term was Mark Esper. Esper has publicly came out and said that he had to not follow President Trump's orders because they were unlawful. One of them was to use active duty soldiers in a policing capacity. Active duty soldiers are not meant to do that. It's not what they're trained for. Active duty soldiers are trained to kill people. That's their goal. They're not trained to go and be a police force in the streets of America. And one of the things that Mark Esper had referenced, or Mr. Esper referenced, is that President Trump at the time alluded to and asked him if they could just go in and shoot the protesters, American protesters on American streets, if they can just shoot them in the knees. Just wound them. Mr. Esper said no, because that's an unlawful order. Yesterday, Mr. Hegseth could not and refused to answer that. But just so you know that we do know how many push-ups that he can do, because Republican Senator Sheehy asked during his time how many push-ups Pete Hegseth could do. So I would just advise you to go back and rewatch. Now, I say that the thing is already pretty much wrapped up, right? Joni Ernst was one of those votes that if she had the courage to do what she should do, right? That maybe some other Republicans might vote with her. Doesn't look like that's the case. Now the only thing that is left to do is to vote. for the senators. Once it gets voted out of committee and it gets put into the Senate floor, then it becomes a strictly majority vote, and Republicans have a majority. So they will vote to confirm Hegseth. And we will hope that he is up to task. I hope that the women in the military, transgender people in the military are safe. And yesterday they did confirm through Sheehy that there's only 2 genders, right? Male and female. That means that they're going to go after transgender soldiers again. People who volunteered. Whenever they talk about a retention crisis, right? They talked about a retention crisis and a recruiting crisis, right? But we're going to kick people out that are trans, that volunteered, that are capable. That was the question that Democrats kept asking. Can you commit to anybody who is physically and mentally capable? Do you commit to ensuring that they are able to serve? He didn't commit to that because he knows that they're going to repeal the transgender, or they're going to ban transgenders in the military again. These people just want to freaking serve in the military. Like, what are we doing? Yeah, but anyway, this week, there's a lot more to go. So again, Pam Bondi is today for Attorney General. So that'll be fun. Kristi Noem was supposed to be, I think it was supposed to be today as well, but it got postponed till Friday. And then I don't know if Tulsi Gabbard's was postponed or not, indefinitely or not, because Tulsi Gabbard came out and said that her trip to see Assad and Syria was actually a surprise to her because she was supposed to be in Lebanon. So more to come on that, because that's a surprise that she's never said before ever, and doesn't make any more sense. So do you want your director of national intelligence not even know what country they're supposed to be going to? I don't know. Anyway, I'm just kidding. But I do hope that you have a good rest of your day. And call your senators, man. Call them. Tell them whatever it is that you want to tell them, but stay involved because it's going to be an interesting few years. See ya.